The Dragonback series by Timothy Zahn. Book 4 Dragon and Herdsman. Chapter 12.
Silently, the dragon headed off into the woods. Jack gave him a 30 count to make sure he was out of sight, then headed back to the resting herd. Allison was sitting with her back against a tree, her gun in her lap. All quiet on the western front? She asked. Seems that way, he confirmed, carefully filtering the annoyance out of his voice. Allison had gotten into the habit of peppering her conversation with these obscure comments, obviously references to things he'd never heard of. It was irritating, but he wasn't about to give her the satisfaction of letting her know that. He certainly wasn't going to ask what in blazes she was talking about. Good, she said. Does that mean you're over your twitchies? Being cautious in enemy territory is not being twitchy, Jack insisted stiffly. And no, I think we ought to stay here a little longer. Allison peered up at the sky. If we do, we may be here all night, she warned. We don't have much daylight left. I think it's worth it, Jack said firmly. I'm staying anyway. Fine, Allison said, resettling herself against the tree. You're in charge of this expedition, so how about telling me a story? Jack frowned. What kind of story? Colonel Frost called you Jack Morgan, she said. 2 months ago, when we were raw recruits sweating through basic training in the Wynyard's Edge mercenaries, they all thought your name was Jack Montana. Was it you or them who got your name wrong? Jack hit a grimace. Them, he said. Probably a clerical error. Yeah, right, she said. Come on, Jack. Like it or not, we're stuck here together. I need to know that I can trust you. Fine, Jack said. In that case, you can go first. Allison lifted her eyebrows. Go first where? You weren't any raw recruit, he reminded her, sitting down, facing her with his back to another tree. You could start by telling me what you were up to that made Sergeant Grisco ready to kill both of us. She sighed, lowering her eyes. It was all Dad's idea, she said reluctantly. He had this crazy notion that merc groups who took teenagers probably didn't keep very good records on them. He figured he could keep indenturing me to one after another, collect the money, and then help me get out, and they'd never catch on. Cute, Jack said. More stupid than cute, actually, but no crazier than some of the scams my uncle and I pulled over the years. So you are a con artist? She asked. That's sort of what I figured. Reformed con artist, Jack corrected. Trying to reform, anyway. So what are you doing in the Wynyard's Edge HQ that night? I wanted to get a peek at their records on me, Allison said. Just in case Dad's plan hadn't been as clever as he thought. I guess I should have waited until we were on sunrise. Or skipped it completely. She made a face. Dad wouldn't have liked that, she said. Well, let's not go into that. Bad childhood? Jack suggested. Allison shrugged. Mom and Dad and I never stayed in one place very long, if that's what you mean. Other than that, I don't know. I don't really have anything to compare it to. Yeah, I know the feeling, Jack said ruefully, thinking back over his own life with Uncle Verge. What kind of work do your parents do? Whatever they can find, she said. Dad always chasing the big one, as he calls it, the job that'll finally bring him fame and fortune and success. I gather he hasn't made it? She shrugged again. There's been some success, I suppose, but there hasn't been any fame. There certainly hasn't been any fortune. Jack nodded. She was being evasive, but he could read between the lines as well as the next guy. Her father was a criminal like Uncle Virgil, though apparently not nearly as successful, which was ironic, considering that it was Uncle Virgil's spectacular career that had caught the attention of Arthur Neverland in the first place, which was what had dragged Jack and now Allison into this mess. Where are your parents now? He asked. Are they the ones you're expecting to pick you up? She shook her head. These are some friends of theirs. Actually, I really don't know where Mom and Dad are. Like I say, they move around a lot. What's a kada? With a supreme effort, Jack managed to keep his face expressionless. A what? A kada, she repeated. Frost said he didn't want you and your kada to suffer the same fate as your uncle. Come on, I've told you about me. It's your turn. I have no idea what he meant by that, Jack said, feeling sweat break out on the back of his neck. He'd completely forgotten that last comment of Frost's just before he shut down his comm clip. This girl was way too observant for his taste. Some slang term, I guess. She stared hard at him with those dark eyes. Jack held her gaze without flinching, and after a moment her lip twitched. Fine, she said. Don't tell me. Can I at least get you can I at least get your real name? Jack Morgan, he said. Raised by my uncle, Virgil Morgan. Virgil Morgan, Allison said thoughtfully. I've heard that name. One of the great con men and safecrackers of our age, isn't he? Certainly in his own mind, Jack said, feeling a ghostly echo of pain and loss. Even more than a year after Uncle Virgil's death, it still hurts sometimes. No, that's not fair. Not if even half the stories are true, Allison agreed, an odd glint in her eye. So you're Virgil Morgan's nephew? Yes, we've established that, Jack said, eyeing her suspiciously. Was there a hint of actual admiration in her voice? Or was it just more sarcasm? Whatever it was, he didn't like it. And I'm reformed, remember? Sure, she said, the faint admiration turning to equally faint amusement. He liked that even less. Well, that was fun, but we really ought to try to get a little more distance before sundown. 10 yards behind her, Jack caught a glimpse of gold dragon scales. If you insist, he said, wincing as he pushed himself up off the ground. Even during the brief rest break, his leg muscles had stiffened up considerably. You still want to handle point? I'm still the one with the gun, she said. By the way, have you noticed that these pukas can change color? Jack's first reaction was to wonder which of these animals could possibly have gotten riled up enough to go into good combat mode. He'd seen that effect a couple of times with Dracos, where some of the poet warrior's heightened blood flow seeped into his gold scales and turned them black. But a second later, he realized that she was actually talking about. As one Kada left his Erasmus host and a differently colored one took his place, Allison would naturally interpret that as the original puka changing colors. No, I hadn't, he said. Interesting. You should pay better attention to your surroundings, Allison said reprovingly as she got to her feet. If she was feeling stiff, it didn't show. And try to keep them quiet. I'm guessing the Malison ring will make some move before nightfall. However, Dracos had worked his end of the scheme. He'd clearly done a terrific job of it. The group reached the area he'd described as the site of the Malison ring picket line to find it completely deserted. Jack had gone perhaps 20 yards past the picket line when, from somewhere ahead and to the right, came a sudden crashing of branches and a distant howl of pain. Ducking around trees and bushes, he rushed toward the sound. Rounding one less stand of reeds, he nearly ran full tilt into Allison as she stood at the edge of another of the sharp drop-offs. Watch it, she said, putting a hand out across his chest. The whole ridge is crumbling. What happened? Jack asked. We lost one, she said grimly, nodding down the cliff. Take a look, but be careful. Holding on to a nearby tree branch, Jack eased up to the edge of the cliff. 30 feet down a steep slope, a dusky red puka was lying on his side, two of his legs thrashing weakly as he struggled to free himself from a tangle of vines. Did you see what happened? About what you'd expect, she growled. Stupid thing wasn't watching where he was going and walked off the edge of the cliff. Question is, what do we do about it? Jack took a step back and looked around. Dracos was nowhere to be seen, probably still playing shepherd off to the left. Let's start by asking Fren, he said. Fren? Fren!
Yes, young Jack,
the Erasva's voice called from behind him. Come here a minute, will you? Jack called back. We've got an injured puka on our hands. The fat alien appeared and stepped to the edge of the drop-off with what seemed to Jack to be a complete lack of caution.
How sad,
he said as he peered down.
How very sad.
Never mind the sadness, Jack said. How do we help him?
Help him?
Friend seemed puzzled.
There is no help for him, young Jack. Not down there. A few hours and he will be gone.
He turned to go. Wait a second, Jack said, grabbing his arm as he looked down at the injured puka. The creature's eyes were half closed, but even in the fading light, Jack could swear he was looking directly at him. We've got some rope in these packs. We'd need more than just rope, Allison said. These things are heavy, and we'd be dragging them against all that vegetation. At the very least, we'd need a block and tackle. We can't just leave him there to die, Jack protested. Allison shrugged. I'm open to suggestions. Jack clenched his hand into fists. There had to be a way to do this. How about if I go down to him? He suggested. And do what? Allison asked. Hold his paw while he dies? I was thinking more about carrying him to safety, Jack growled, pointing past the drop-off. That cut goes around that low hill over there. If I can get through it, I should be able to get around the hill and meet you a little way northwest of here. And what if you can't get through? Allison countered. It wouldn't be safe to leave the rope tied here. We might as well put up a sign telling the Malison ring which way we've gone. If you can't get through, you'll be trapped. I'll get through, Jack said stubbornly, pulling off his backpack. Just get me down there and take the herd around the hill. I'll do the rest. Jack, and we're wasting time and light, Jack cut her off. Give me a hand with this rope. Allison hissed between her teeth. Fine, it's your funeral. The sky had darkened considerably by the time they were ready. Just relax and walk your feet down the slope, Allison said, looping the rope around a thick tree trunk and pulling it taut. I'll ease you down. Right, Jack said, doing one last check of the makeshift harness she'd created for him. Here goes. Jack had done plenty of climbing in his lifetime, mostly up and down small buildings he was in the process of robbing. But going down this way, at the end of a rope he wasn't controlling, was a brand new experience, and definitely not a pleasant one. Muttering under his breath, he waded backward through the vines, trying hard not to get his feet tangled. Seemed like forever before he finally came to a halt beside the injured puka. Easy, fella, Jack soothed the creature as he climbed awkwardly out of his harness. The soothing tone wasn't necessary. The puka had abandoned even his weak attempts at freeing himself and was lying motionlessly on his side. His eyes were still on Jack, his heavy, heaving flanks the only sign of life. Jack? Allison's voice drifted down toward him. Jack looked up. In the fading light, she wasn't much more than a silhouette against the gray sky above her. I'm here, he called back. Get going. I'll see you around the other side. Allison made as if to say something, then seemed to give it a reluctant nod. Be careful. She pulled up the rope, then disappeared away from the cliff. Jack took a deep breath. When you have a Kadar, you're never really alone, he told himself. Dracos, he called softly. I am here, the familiar voice came. With a rustle of ferns, the dragon appeared from concealment. I am not certain this was a wise move, though. Yeah, well, rescuing wayward Kadar seems to have become my hobby, Jack growled. Get over here and tell me what's wrong with him. Dracos' examination was quick but thorough. His left foreleg is injured, he reported. It might be broken, but I think it is merely sprained. The left hind leg also seems hurt, but not as badly. What are his chances of recovery? Very good, Dracos assured him. I received a similar sprain during the Haven Seeker's crash landing. I needed no treatment to recover. Good. Jack held out a hand to the injured puka. Okay, big fella, come aboard. The puka didn't move. Well, come on, Jack said, this time reaching down and grasping the uninjured foreleg paw. You want to stay here all night? His only reaction was to try to pull out of Jack's grip. I don't think he understands what you want, Dracos said. Oh, come on, Jack insisted. He has to understand hosts. Yes, but you're not a host, Dracos countered. At least, not the kind he has always known. Jack let his breath out in a huff. He should have guessed it wouldn't be this easy. So what now? We carry him? Or we leave him here to die, Draco said. I was afraid of that, Jack said disgustedly, measuring the fallen puka with his eyes. He looked a lot bigger and a lot heavier than he had from 30 feet up. Let's get to it then. Yes, Draco said, prodding at the puka's side with his muzzle. Can you help me get him onto my back? Sorry, pal, Jack said, pushing at the side of Draco's long neck. My job. I'm stronger than you are. Absolutely, Jack agreed. You're also the only one who can scout ahead and clear obstacles out of our way. He lifted his eyebrows. Unless you really want to try cutting vine meshes with him balanced across your back. Dracos' tail curved unhappily, but he was too smart not to see that Jack was right. Very well, he said reluctantly. I will assist you. That's okay. Crouching down, Jack got a grip on the puka's two uninjured legs. He then bracing himself, he hauled the creature up and swung him onto his shoulders. Ugh, he muttered as he settled his load into place. Why couldn't we have found a colony of baby Kada? In a Kada colony, each generation is conceived and delivered together within a 2-year period, Draco said. This colony must be in the middle of that cycle. I was being rhetorical, Jack said with a sigh. Don't just stand there. Find me a path.